welcome to the Dave Cast for this July 14th. You know, it's hard to believe we are now on part 14 of our study of Exodus. And so it's taken 14 sessions to get to chapter 19. Just to give you a little preview of what's ahead, after these next couple of chapters, we're going to start moving just a little bit faster because the narrative becomes more like snippets in between these huge blocks of laws. And so we're going to deal with that when we come to it. But today, we've reached a very interesting part of our study as we're now up to chapter 19 and we read that the Israelites have finally reached Mount Sinai where they will camp for about 11 months. But you'll also remember this is the place where God spoke to Moses through the burning bush back in Exodus 3. It was called Mount Horeb there, but it's the same place. And here begins a section where Moses gets a lot of exercise because he is continuously climbing up and down Mount Sinai. I think 3 or 4 times in this chapter alone. Watch that. So chapter 19, verse 3. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be from me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." And so basically here we have God telling Moses he wants to offer a covenant to the Israelites and for Moses to tell them of this offer. And so then Moses climbs back down the mountain to the people and he delivers this good news that God is going to make an offer to them, a covenant. And so the Israelites agree. And then Moses climbs back up the mountain to bring the Israelites this reply to God. So this time up on the mountain, God tells Moses to get the Israelites ready for the covenant. It's going to be on the 3rd day, and he sets up some boundaries of how close they can approach the mountain. And so let's just read that because I think it's very interesting. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the 3rd day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them. No person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain." And so then Moses goes back down the mountain and he tells the Israelites that they have 2 days to get ready for this. And remember, God has told Moses to consecrate the people, to set them apart, to purify them so they will be qualified, I guess, to meet God. The Hebrew word that's employed here is the same root word that we use, holy. It means to be ceremonially pure or whole. And, you know, it's a similar thing that when we have Holy Communion, and you remember that part of that ritual is the consecration of the elements, the bread and the juice, which is just plain Welch's grape juice and some bread that we bought at the store. But when we consecrate them, then we set them apart. So at the communion table, the bread and the juice are holy. It's a similar thing here that's going on. And so we don't know the exact details of how Moses consecrated the Israelites, but what is of importance is to note that they are set apart before they were ready to meet God. And so they did that by a couple of ways that we know of. They were to wash their clothes. And then by washing their clothes, I think it sort of symbolically demonstrated that they were understanding that God was holy and to meet Him was holy. And then he said not to have any sexual activity. So in other words, they're to abstain from any personal indulgence which would take their heart and mind off of God. And I think the lesson here is that meeting with God requires personal preparation. You know, we need to go to Him with an undivided mind. It means allowing not anything else, no matter how blessed or wonderful it may be, to distract us from preparing to hear from God. And so let's pick it up in verse 16. On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. The Lord descended to the top of the mountain and called Moses to the top of the mountain. And so Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "Go down and warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, because many of them will perish. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them." Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy." The Lord replied, "Go down and bring Aaron up with you, but the priest and the people must not force their way through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them." And so Moses went down to the people and told them. And so once again, here we have kind of a full-on Old Testament God, right? And we've talked earlier about like the last time that Moses was at this mountain when God told Moses to come close, but don't come any closer, keep your distance, take off your shoes, this is holy ground. And so here in these verses, it's kind of a similar thing, right? God tells Moses to set limits all around so that the people would not go up and touch the mountain unless they incurred the death penalty, which to our New Testament ears might seem a little extreme. But I do think there are two important takeaways which can be said here about God setting boundaries around the mountain. First of all, it was to teach the people that God was different from them. God was holy, and He was not to be approached lightly. And then secondly, the boundaries told them that He could only be approached on His terms, on God's terms. And so how can we apply this in our lives today? Well, I don't know about you, but in my relationship with God, I often can't see the goodness of God because my vision is clouded by all the distractions and difficulties I face. I miss the goodness of God when I let my focus become fixated on my frustrations rather than looking up at the wonders of God's goodness and blessings I enjoy each day. When I think of this passage from Exodus, a passage from the book of James comes to mind, James 4, 8 through 10. And it says, "Come near to God, and He will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." Okay, folks, on Thursday, we're going to be looking at Exodus 20 when Moses receives the Ten Commandments. So really good stuff ahead, and I hope you'll be with us then. But for now, God bless, keep bringing the hope, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Bye-bye.